St.Joseph Vaz, co. the 21st of April 1651 to 16 January 1711, was an Oratorian priest and missionary in Sri Lanka, then known as Ceylon. The Vaz arrived in Ceylon during the Dutch occupation, when the Dutch were imposing Calvinism as the official religion after taking over from the Portuguese. He traveled throughout the island, bringing the Eucharist and the sacraments to clandestine groups of Catholics. Later in his mission, he found shelter in the Kingdom of Kandy, where he was able to work freely. By the time of his death, Vaz had managed to rebuild the Catholic Church on the island. As a result of his labors, Vaz is known as the Apostle of Ceylon. On the 21st of January 1995, he was beatified by Pope John Paul II in Colombo. He was canonized on the 14th of January 2015 by Pope Francis in an open-air mass ceremony at the Gallface Green in Colombo. Early life. The third of 6 children, Vaz was born in 1651 at Binolim, his mother's village in Goa, then known as Portuguese India, part of the Portuguese Empire. His parents, Cristovo Vaz and Maria de Miranda, were devout Catholics. Cristovo belonged to a prominent Naik family of Sankale. He was baptized on the 8th day at the parish church of St. John the Baptist, Binolim, by its pastor, Jacinto Pereira. The Vaz attended the elementary school in Sankale. He learned Portuguese in Sankale and Latin in Binolim. He was a bright pupil and respected by his teachers and fellow students. He made such rapid progress in his studies that his father decided to send him to the city of Goa for further studies, where he did a course in rhetoric and humanities at the Jesuit College of St. Paul. He further studied philosophy and theology at the St. Thomas Aquinas Academy of the Dominicans in Goa City. In 1675, Vaz was ordained a deacon for the Archdiocese of Goa by Custodio de Pinho, the Vicar Apostolic of Bijapur and Golconda. In 1676, he was ordained a priest by the Archbishop of Goa, Antonio Brandois. Sist. Soon after his ordination, he started going barefoot to live like the poor and acquired a reputation as a popular preacher and confessor. He opened a Latin school in Sankale for prospective seminarians. In 1677 he consecrated himself as a slave of Mary, sealing it with a document known as the Deed of Bondage. Ministry in Kanara. The Vaz wanted to serve as a missionary in Ceylon, and therefore presented his request to go to the cathedral chapter, which was administering the diocese following the vacancy created by the death of Brando on the 6th of July 1678. However, the cathedral chapter proposed to him to go to Kanara instead, where the Padrawado authorities in Goa were in conflict with the local authorities belonging to the Sacred Congregation of Propaganda-Fide, the Vatican agency for missionary efforts worldwide. Vaz was appointed the Vicar Foreign of Kanara by the Padrawado in 1681, and sent with the purpose of asserting the jurisdiction against the Propaganda-Fide. The chapter also gave him the esteemed title of Frame of Kanara. Upon his arrival, he found the situation of the Roman Catholic Church to be highly explosive. The Padrawado authorities in Goa were at conflict with those of the Propaganda-Fide in Kanara, led by the already incumbent Vicar Foreign, Bishop Thomas de Castro. The source of the conflict was that de Castro's appointment as Vicar Foreign of Kanara by Pope Clement X on the 30th of August 1675 was not recognized by the preceding Padrawado Archbishop. Consequently, they did not cede the jurisdiction to him despite the Pope's letter of appointment. The Padroado propaganda conflict which ensued divided the Catholics of Canara into two sides: those who recognized the authority of the Padroado, Archbishop Ingoa, versus those who supported De Castro. Those who recognized the authority of the Padroado were excommunicated by De Castro, while those who recognized the authority of the propaganda were excommunicated by the Padroado authorities at Goa. Both groups were forbidden from receiving sacraments from the priests of the rival group on penalty of excommunication. In a letter dated the 14th of September 1681, Vaz lamented, "Many in fact believe that the Catholic Church is divided, and that we and the bishops' priests are not children of the same mother church, and that our doctrines and our sacraments are different, and what the ones do, the others destroy. Thus the Catholic Church is much despised and is not acceptable." With great diplomacy and humility, Vaz met De Castro at Mangalore, and after having convinced himself of the legitimacy of the documents, brought about a truce until a direction was received from the new Pope Innocent XI. In light of the fact that the bishop had legitimate authority, Vaz recognized his authority and, while continuing to adhere to the Padroado system, zealously worked for the religious welfare of the people. The bishop further agreed to delegate jurisdiction to him conditionally. The Vaz often spoke to him and pleaded with him not to issue so many excommunications, but to wait for a final decision from the Pope. He pointed out that the Hindus were scandalized and the Christians bewildered by these arguments. During his stay, Vaz undertook serious missionary activities in Canara from 1681 to 1684, carrying out a lot of missionary work in Mangalore, Basra, Bakor, Mulki, Kalyanpur and other areas, and reviving the spirits and faith of the widely scattered Roman Catholic community. He reconstructed the Rosario Cathedral in Mangalore and built new churches at Onnur, Basra, Kundapur, and Gangolim. He also set up small schools in some of the villages with the cooperation of the residents. The Vaz's most important contribution, however, was the establishment of a large number of ermitages throughout Canara, where he would periodically celebrate festive occasions with great pomp. Vaz was compelled to do so due to a shortage of priests, and as such an ermitage brought together the Catholics of a place where there was no church or resident priest. To this end, he constructed small huts and asked the local Catholics to gather there and recite the prayers. This greatly helped to keep alive and encourage the religious fervor for Christianity. In his short stay, Vaz acquired a great and saintly reputation. He did yeoman service to the cause of the upliftment of the downtrodden. Many miracles are attributed to him. A local legend has it that while serving as parish priest of Our Lady of Mercy Parish, Panier, a few kilometers from Madhipur, Bantwal, a few Hindus arrived in the night, asking him to accompany them to administer final sacraments to a sick parishioner in the neighborhood of Madhipur. The men had conspired to slay the priest due to his tireless missionary activities. When they reached the top of the hill, the men tried to kill him. The serene Vaz knelt down on the rock and held his stick straight on the ground. A light flashed in the midst and the men could see water gushing from the spots where he knelt. Owing to this miracle, the men fled from the scene and Vaz returned to the parish unharmed. A shrine dedicated to him was constructed at that very site at Madhipur. It is visited annually by thousands of pilgrims and devotees, seeking blessings and cures for various ailments. The new Archbishop, Manuel de Sousa y Menezes, arrived in Goa and was displeased with Vaz on account of the agreement he had made with De Castro. When Vaz sought permission to return to Goa, the request was refused by the Archbishop. After the Archbishop's death in 1684, however, the Cathedral chapter of Goa allowed him to return to Goa, replacing him with Nicholas de Gamboa, one of his former assistants. Oratorian. When Vaz returned to Goa, he spent his time preaching in the surrounding villages. He also joined a group of priests of the archdiocese who had decided to live together in a religious community. The group was formally erected as a community of the Congregation of the Oratory of St. Philip Neri on the 25th of September 1685, the first native religious community in the diocese. They took charge of the Church of the Holy Cross of Miracles, where they established the residence. Vaz was elected first provost of the community. Sri Lanka mission. Hearing of the distressful situation of the Catholics of Ceylon who reportedly had no priests for many years, Vaz desired to go to the rescue, but instead he was named superior of the Kanara mission, a post which he occupied for 3 years. In 1686, Vaz obtained permission to give up this office and to proceed to Ceylon. He stopped in the Keladi Kingdom in 1686 to 1687 for a few months on his way to Ceylon, where, helped by his companions, he attended to the spiritual needs of the local Christians. Disguised as a mendicant, he reached the port of Tuticorin on Easter Sunday 1687. Jaffna mission. On landing at Jaffna, Vaz found a strong Calvinist presence. As Catholic priests were banned by the Dutch authorities, he had to travel under the guise of a mendicant and to work in secret. He traveled barefoot as an Indian sannyasi. The Vaz suffered from acute dysentery, contracted from the terrible traveling conditions. Upon recovering, he began contacting Catholics and hiding from the Dutch. He was taken in and ministered to his secret flock by night. In 1689, taking up his residence in a village called Sinalai where the Catholics were numerous and resolute, the Vaz succeeded in reviving the spirit of the faithful. In 1690, he was forced to change his quarters for Puttalam, where he worked with great success for a whole year. Portuguese. A Portuguese Creole was the common language of the local Catholic communities those days, as it was the case till recently among burghers. Communication was not a problem for Padre Joseph Vaz. Kandy mission. In 1692, Vaz settled in Kandy, the capital of the independent kingdom of Kandy, as his center of operations. On his arrival, he was deemed to be a Portuguese spy and was imprisoned with 2 other Catholics. Though he learned Sinhala, the local language, they were left alone by the prison guards as long as they didn't try to escape, and he built a hut church and later a proper church dedicated to Our Lady. Began converting other prisoners. Making the most of his newfound freedom, Vaz made a mission visit to the Dutch-controlled areas and visited Catholics in Colombo. 3 missionaries from the Oratory of Goa arrived in 1697 to help him with the news that Pedro Pacheco, Bishop of Kochi, had appointed Vaz as Vicar General in Ceylon. He was organizing the basic mission structure when smallpox broke out in Kandy. His work with the sick convinced the king to allow Vaz freedom in his labors. The Vaz carried his mission to the main centers of the island. Between 1687 and 1711, he was at the head of a group of Goan Bayman priests who, under his leadership and inspiration, mixed and moved about undercover, sustaining the persecuted Roman Catholic population in Ceylon. The Vaz returned to Kandy in 1699 with a fellow priest, Joseph do Carvalho, who had been expelled at the instigation of Buddhist monks. He completed the construction of his new church, and went into service for the king, translating Portuguese books into Sinhala. For this vantage point, Vaz intensified his ministry, and converted some Sinhalese notables. New missionaries arrived in 1705, which enabled him to organize the mission into 8 districts, each led by a priest. He worked on the creation of Catholic literature comparable to that of the Buddhists, and to affirm the rights of Catholics with those of the Dutch Calvinist government. He was assisted by Father Joaquim Gonçalves. Vaz humbly declined the offer made to him in 1705 to be the bishop and first vicar apostolic of Ceylon, preferring to remain a simple missionary. For this reason, he is often depicted with a mitre beside him. Batticaloa Mission. Joseph Vaz visited Batticaloa in 1710 in order to revive the Catholic faith during the time of Dutch persecution against Catholics. He visited a church in Thandavan Valley, now known as Church of Our Lady of Presentation, where he was tied to a tree and beaten. Again, he made a second visit to Batticaloa for reviving the Catholic faith and returned to Kandy. Death. King Vimaldana Surya II, Vaz's patron, died in 1707, but Vira Narendra Sinha, his successor, proved to be an even greater supporter. New missionaries arrived in 1708. In 1710, despite health problems, Vaz took another apostolic trip. On his return, he fell ill. He recovered from a series of infections and fevers, but was left weakened. He undertook 8 days of spiritual exercises prescribed by the Oratorian rule, but before the 7th day he died at Kandy on the 16th of January 1711, aged 59. Vaz's work was carried forward by Joaquim Gonçalves. Veneration. The subject of his beatification was first urged upon the consideration of the Holy See about 1737 by Francisco de Vasconcelos S.J., Bishop of Kochi, who also claimed jurisdiction over Ceylon. The title of Servant of God is given to a deceased person whose life and works are being investigated by the Catholic Church in consideration for official recognition as a saint. The process was begun in Goa and a number of miracles were registered, but the non-fulfillment of certain essential formalities led Pope Benedict XIV to cancel the proceedings, with an order, however, that they should be reinstituted. The apostolic delegate of the East Indies, Ladislaus Zaleski, who was resident in Kandy, kept hearing reports of this saintly priest. He did his own research about him, was a great admirer of Joseph Vaz and published a multi-issued biography of him. Venerable Blessed. The beatification process was resumed later and completed in 1953 by the Archdiocese of Goa and Amin. On the 21st of January 1995, he was beatified by Pope John Paul II in Colombo, Sri Lanka. Saint in October 2013, a diocesan inquiry of a miracle attributed to Vaz took place. In November 2013, Patriarch Felipe Neri Ferrao stated that the cause for Vaz's canonization had reached a crucial stage. The Pope approved the vote by the ordinary session of cardinals and bishops in favor of canonization of the Indian-born priest and decided to summon a consistory shortly after. Pope Francis waived the requirement for a second miracle, generally a requirement for canonization. The Pope used the same process he used to canonize Pope St. John XXIII without a second miracle attributed to his intercession. Joseph Vaz was canonized by Pope Francis on the 14th of January 2015 in Colombo at Goldface, Sri Lanka. St. Joseph Vaz is the first saint to have been canonized in Sri Lanka, the first saint of Sri Lanka and first originally from the area of Goa, India. The canonization of Joseph Vaz was celebrated at the St. Joseph Vaz Shrine, Mudipur, Mangalore, during 14 to 16 January 2015, as he was the first priest from the Kingaon coast to be canonized. Legacy. So far the only school named in honor of Vaz is the Joseph Vaz College of Wenipua, Sri Lanka, which was founded in January 1935 by the Marist brothers. In Goa there is a school named St.Joseph Vaz at Sankara. In Karnataka, there is a parish dedicated to Vaz in Madipur in Sri Lanka. There is a chapel under his patronage in a remote village called Aluthwela, about 10 miles off Galawela in the parish of Wihakot. There is a small community of Christians who are migrant farmers from Wihakot who brought the devotion to him. Bibliography. Primary letters of Blessed Joseph Vaz, son of Goa, Apostle of Kanara and Sri Lanka. Ed. Cosma Jose Vaz Costa. Goa, Eremito M. Rebello, 2011. Secondary Mascarenas. Michael, S.D.B. Through Storm and Tempest. A biography of Blessed Joseph Vaz, Apostle of Kanara and Sri Lanka, and an account of the historic exploits of the first Oratorians in Sri Lanka. Mumbai, Tej Prasarini Don Bosco Communications, 2001. Mascarenas. Michael, S.D.B. Bhaktivant Jose Vaz Ahem Karitravanan, Kanara and Sri Lanka Prashitani Go MQ Pratam Oratorian Sansthan Sri Lankit Kalya Karitrik Misau Vavracha Viva, TR, into Kingani by Reginald Pinto, Santosh Menezes, OFM Cap and Victor Rodriguez. Mumbai, Tej Prasarini Don Bosco Communications, 2002. Mascarenas. Michael, S.D.B. Vadolani Tufnanantlian. Gersho Bhagavan Put Padre Jews Vazakia Jivatachi Kotha. Translation into Kingani by Thomas Misquith and Jess Fernandez. Anjim Boss Con Communications, 2010. Mascarenas. Michael, S.D.B. Vadalvara Virginia Tufanatan, Danyavada Joseph Vaz Yanchijivan Karitra. Translation into Marathi by Neil Dabra. Mumbai, Tej Prasarini Don Bosco Communications, 2006. Cabralisa, Mario, and Lourdes Bravo da Costa Rodriguez, Great Guns, Volume 1, Abe Faria, Fr. Jose Vaz, Lata Mangeshkar, T.B. Cunha, N.N. AP Publications, 1986. Don Peter, W. L.A. Studies in Ceylon Church History, Colombo, Catholic Press, 1963. Don Peter, W. L.A. Historical Gleanings, Colombo, N.P. 1992. Gomez, Manuel. Blessed Joseph Vaz, a creative missionary ahead of his time. Old Goat Manuel P. Gomez, Pastoral Institutes and Pius X, 2010. Gunetalik, H. AIA Bibliography of Ceylon. 5 vols. Zug, Switzerland, 1975–1983. Pereira, Dennis G. Blessed Joseph Vaz, The Man, His Mission, His Message. Bombay, Pauline C. 1996. Pereira, S.G. Life of Blessed Joseph Vaz, Apostle of Sri Lanka. Ontario, Humanics Universal Inc., 2011. Pereira, S.G. ed. The Oratorian Mission in Ceylon. Historical documents relating to the life and labors of the Venerable Father Joseph Vaz, his companions and successors. Colombo, Caxton Printing Works, 1936. Perniola v. The Catholic Church in Sri Lanka, the Dutch period. 2 vols. Dehiwala, Tisara Prakasakayo, 1983. Perniola v. Tr. The Catholic Church in Sri Lanka. The Portuguese period. Original documents. Ceylon Historical Journal Monograph Series 1516. Dehiwala, Tisara Prakasakayo, 1989. Wickramasinghe, Martin. Landmarks of Sinhalese Literature. Colombo, Gunasina, 1948–1963. Gomez, Luis. Bodvoiadnik. Costa, Cosma. A Letter from Joseph Vaz. De Regard, Sebastião. Vida de Venerável Padre José Vaz.